Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We're going to be getting into some question submissions and some big ahas that came out of our most recent 7-day Master Your Fasting Challenge. Some conversations as we feel are going to benefit all of us on the Fasting for Life journey. So if you are new to the podcast, welcome in. Excited to have you with us. Thanks for giving us a shot. If you want to know more about how fasting transformed our lives and why we do what we do week in and week out with our episodes and challenges and resources, head back to episode 0, episode 1. Give them a listen. It'll give you some insight into what fasting has truly done in our lives. And now we are forever on this Fasting for Life journey with you. So welcome in. If you're a long-term listener, thank you so much for continuing to join us and be on this journey with us. We love the comments. We love the shout-outs. We love the questions you submit. I truly feel grateful that we get to do this alongside of you as we're continuing to adapt a long-term fasting lifestyle. So I want to give a first shout-out, Tommy, to Vermont Lady. Thank you so much for leaving us a 5-star review. Tommy, let's break it down.
Yeah, absolutely. So Vermont Lady said, actionable steps, great conversation. I look forward to hearing about all of the latest research, tips for creating a fasting lifestyle. And she said, I started fasting 2 years ago when was able to drop 50 pounds and keep it off. Wow. Incredible work. I also was able to bring my A1C down out of the diabetic zone and even out of the pre-diabetic zone too. I am a lifelong dieter that have basically given up on my metabolism once I reached menopause, and we hear that a lot. Now that I've entered into the world of fasting, I'm able to finally enjoy food, eat healthy, and without restriction. I even started a micro bakery with all things sourdough, and I had so much success that my husband joined me on this journey, and now we're supporting one another as we enter our retirement years too. We call that the marriage merge. So that's so really, really, really cool for both of you guys. Thank you guys for all your hard work, sharing your enthusiasm, knowledge, and coaching advice. You're very welcome, Vermont Lady. Thank you for taking the time to share that with us. That's really inspiring, and it's the reason why we do this, is just so we can continue to hear the incredible stories and testimonials from everybody, because everybody's story is a bit different. We all have different reasons why we came into fasting, different histories, but then we're able to use it as a launching pad into a whole new chapter of life. So really, really excited for you. So stay in touch and tell us what else is going on and what else you're achieving with your fasting lifestyle in the future.
And what I love is that the perspective that it was started 2 years ago, drop it and keep it off.
Yep.
Right? That's going to be one of the big conversations that we talk about today, which is one of the questions that we got, and we're going to go over here, is about how to improve consistency. Mm-hmm. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But thank you again, Vermont Lady, for taking the time to leave us one of our favorite kind of reviews, the 5-star kind. We are so grateful that we are able to have so many. And it really, truly keeps us going on delivering quality action steps and things that you can stay consistent with. So amazing work. So Tom, let's get into the few conversation topics that we're going to go through today.
Cool.
One of the questions that came in after the challenge, we had a couple that came in after the challenge had ended from people that had joined us. And this is a really big picture, kind of 30,000 foot view that so many of us struggle with. And then there's a secondary question about chronic fatigue. So this came in from Jenny, and she said, my challenge is not the fast, it's the eating. If you could address fasting and subsequent, are shorter fasts recommended for people with chronic fatigue? But I know that's a loaded topic, probably requires more time. So we have time to break this down today. So I'll answer the direct question first, which is, Are shorter fasts recommended for people with chronic fatigue? And the reality of fasting, the bigger picture question was, my challenge is not the fast, it's the eating. And Tommy, I don't know if we have
Preach it.
exact numbers on this, right?
Yeah.
But we do ask poll questions from time to time. And whenever we ask the poll question on what is the biggest gap on where you are now in your weight loss and health journey to where you want to be with your result-based goal that lives off in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And 80% of the time, what we hear back is relationship with food and nutrition choices, food choices. So what do I do during the eating nutrition windows? And what are my default behaviors around my snackcidents and my, my imbalanced food relationships? So when I'm hungry, angry, happy, lonely, tired, bored, stressed is a huge one. Underslept is another big one.
Yeah.
Where do those default behaviors go? So what we found over the years is it's not, the fasting is the simple part, right? In concept, fasting is simple. You don't eat. You restrict your eating opportunities, right? You put boundaries around your time-restricted feeding, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the more difficult part is really that long-term relationship or behavior around the foods and the food choices that we make, especially in the food noise-filled, obesogenic, ultra-refined, processed, convenient food world that we find ourselves in.
Absolutely.
So this is going to talk about the consistency that Vermont lady had mentioned as well over the course of years, not days, not weeks, not months, but that cumulative consistent effort. So the question here for this person was, are shorter fasts recommended for people with chronic fatigue? Well, not automatically, because if the fatigue stems more from an adrenal stress response, adrenal burnout, shorter fast may help, but the thing is, the longer fast, now we're not talking about extended day fast here. We're talking about anything from 24 up to 36, maybe an occasional 48. Mm-hmm. Those fasts are going to build your fat adaptation and allow yourself to get glycogen depleted and increase your insulin sensitivity and raise your BDNF, which is your brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which can actually restore your energy and vitality over time. So the problem is you might feel stuck in the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when you feel stuck in the moment, sometimes it's just because it was surprising by how you felt when you went to break that fast, because you were feeling really, really good. You're feeling well. Maybe you're feeling like, I'm finally getting some relief from some of my symptoms. I'm feeling like more like myself. And then all of a sudden you go to break your fast, and then it almost feels like fasting, it's not the solution you were looking for, because it's giving you negative feedback at the end of that fast. And so sometimes that's where the frustration and the questioning the method kind of comes from. And so, but to your point from earlier, Scott, it's almost surprising how much the food is really the issue and is like the long-term lever. It's the more, it definitely is the larger lever, but it's
for the long-term success, for sure.
Absolutely, but it's the one that's less talked about, because like you said, we've asked thousands of people, what are you most concerned with, like coming off of the challenge, or coming off of like, hey, okay, I'm starting to get some of these pieces in place, but what am I going to do as far as long-term success? The overwhelming majority will point to the food, but almost nobody comes to us with an initial set of questions that has anything to do with food. It's usually, hey, what's the best fasting schedule?
Yep.
So that's the shiny object that's on everybody's mind as far as the big lever, but it's really not the one that moves the long-term needle. And that's what I find really most interesting, almost like a cognitive dissonance that we all have when we're kind of going into this fasting adventure here.
Yeah, so what Jenny identified is something that's really common. The fast feels easy, the eating windows feels chaotic, especially when you're tired, stressed, or have that emotional relationship, right?
Right.
So if we're looking at practical guardrails for the eating window, so from a free-for-all into something more predictable and calming, pre-plan your meal. Like, decide in advance what you're going to be breaking your fast with. Protein paste, healthy fat, fiber, lower on the carb side if you've got substantial weight to lose. And put some structure in your eating window, in your nutrition opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to have a small meal, a larger meal, and maybe I'll allow myself one snack in that nutrition opportunity.
Okay.
Instead of that constant reach for that constant pull to the thing, that constant grazing type, snacking type behavior. Absolutely front load protein, and take an emotional pause, kind of like almost like a ritual or a habit that you want to start working on. So before you eat, do a short little kind of 10 to 30, 60-second check-in. Like, how tired am I? How stressed am I? Am I physically hungry, or am I seeking comfort? Right? Like, name it out loud. Put it on paper. That's going to help you take control and kind of calm that stress response, because this person asked about chronic fatigue. So if that's coming from a stress response, HPA axis, cortisol kind of disruption, then we need to take a moment and take the roar out of the fire, so to speak, right? So it's going to set yourself up for success. And if you notice that kind of guilt, shame, secrecy, loss of control, overeating type behavior, we don't necessarily want to compensate harder with more fasting, because that's just going to lead to the same behavior coming back. We want to identify what's causing it and give ourselves a moment to kind of calm down and take a pause before we move into that nutrition opportunity.
Yeah, it really is about kind of getting our bearings in order and calming down the emotional state before we break the fast. You have the same kind of phenomenon that can happen if you have an intense workout and you have a nutrition opportunity that's right after that, and you really just kind of revved up the fire, so to speak, and you're feeling like ravenous. Like, it's a really good thing to be proactive during those points, so you can calm those down, kind of get your wits about you, and then you can make much more logical decisions right after that aren't just driven by like an emotional or an extreme hunger or other feeling. I mean, it could even be anything else emotional. It could be just boredom or anything else. But separating us from that allows us to make better decisions that then we're able to really feel through our true hunger signals. And then now we're eating for physical nutrition rather than more emotional eating. And that's always going to lend itself to long-term success.
And I mean, that really is the underpinning of the consistency trap, right? And we'll kind of unpack that here, because this question came in from Jay Annette, and it was really just an open-ended question of how to improve consistency, right? Yeah. So isn't that the crux of it all, right? If we look at the research and we look at the people that are able to maintain their weight loss and their body composition changes and allow the transformative process of the version 2.0 of you, right? The future person that shows up differently, that has more confidence around food, that is, not always struggling with the weight of the diet roller coaster or that old dieting mindset.
That sticks with it even when it's not all that exciting even.
Right. That does the dull and mundane. So we talk about this on day 7 of the challenges, which is that the definition of consistency. And there's a boring part and there's an exciting part. And then there's the trap. So I want to unpack that just a little bit here, because there's a thread with a couple of these conversations.
Yeah, okay.
Is the definition of consistency that we like to highlight is the ability to replicate a process or activity with the same level or quality over and over again. Kind of sounds like discipline-ish, right?
Sure, yeah.
Kind of boring. A little bit more boring. The adherence of the same principles in a steadfast way. Okay, Scott and Tommy, that sounds great. What am I going to do with that?
Right.
Here's where we can get a little bit of excitement behind working on consistency in our fasting and nutrition window opportunities. Is consistency is what transforms average into excellence. This is where your consistent efforts will turn into that big result-based goal, that big weight loss goal, that big diabetes reversal goal, whatever it is, that big, I want to prevent the Alzheimer's, dementia, lifestyle, chronic disease that's in my family, that's in my aunts and uncles and grandparents, right? Or friends or loved ones. But here's where the trap comes in, is that we become impatient. And impatience is a form of resistance. Resistance to the growth cycle, which is that learning and changing. And you just need to give yourself time to learn that lesson. Involved, here's the catch, here's the hold up the mirror and look back at yourself, right? Because the hardest person to coach is the person staring back at you in the mirror. You need to give yourself time to learn the lesson involved with the problem that you ultimately and your behaviors ultimately created. And that kind of stings a little bit.
It does, but when you can sit with that for a moment and go, yeah, you know what? Even over the decades, maybe I started building the problem before I knew what I was doing.
Before you knew what the problem was.
Right. I mean, it's like being a frog in the boiling pot of water, just 1 degree at a time. I didn't realize it was a problem, or I didn't realize I was making the problem worse, or maybe you were actively trying to make it better and it just wasn't working because of something else that you were doing that was kind of overriding your efforts. And that was the case for a lot of us who already had some level of insulin resistance. And then while we were trying to eat less and move more, count calories, count macros, it wasn't enough at that point. A small calorie deficit while we still spiked insulin all throughout the day, multiple times a day, was just too much. That was overwhelming the math. The math wasn't mathing at that point. And when you look at it in this kind of way, and hey, I made this issue, and now I'm the only one that can deal with it. You reach an empowering point of freedom when you realize how long it took to create the problem. So have some dang patience with the solution, right?
That decreases that impatience part, right? So that resistant part, like the resistance to the time that it takes for that transformation or that change.
Exactly. And as an adult, we become so impatient with pretty much everything because cognitively we're very sophisticated. And especially when we know that we know the answer, we know the how, but now we just have to walk it out, and it's going to take some time. Our brains tend to get very impatient at that point. So if you can bring yourself back to some of that childhood wonder and remember when you were a kid learning a new skill, whether it was, how to play basketball or how to rollerblade or ride a bike or tie your shoes or write in cursive, all of these things when you're a kid, you were curious about, and there was no like rush of time, right? You think about yourself in a childhood kind of way. You weren't impatient with the process of learning something because you hadn't been through it 1,000 times. So you just kind of did it. You did the mundane. You stayed consistent with something, and you just built it like one little piece of skill at a time, like 1% of the skill, and eventually you just got better at it. And so let's bring some of that like almost like childhood bliss, childhood naivete, like almost childhood ignorance about the process, bring that back into our fasting, and we'll become naturally a little bit more patient with ourselves too.
Yeah, because if you think about like a perfect example of like learning to play basketball, my son just played basketball for the first time. He was on a team. Now we have 3 basketballs. We ended up getting him a basketball hoop for Christmas.
Yeah.
And his excitement, even though he's not great yet, right? Even though he lacks the skills to be like some of the other kids on the team that have been playing for longer,
right?
He still has that excitement about wanting to go and practice and shoot and dribble and put his basketball shoes on and go out even when it's cold. And like, so there's that excitement about it. And that's why I love the definition in the adult brain of that consistency is what transforms average into excellence. And the only way to break that impatience or that resistance cycle is to take an action. Action trumps all motivation, all mindset. Because doing the dull, mundane thing, right? The adherence of the same principles in a steadfast way, doing the dull, mundane thing when you don't feel like you want to do it is the true definition of transformation. Is when, yes, the fasting becomes easier, but the decisions you make around the food choices and the nutrition windows and the sticking to the schedule and the planning and all of that becomes so much easier. But it all comes down to taking that action. So what do you do with action? Well, you put a couple of 2 to 3 things a week. We always say every podcast episode, take one thing you heard from today's episode and put it into your fasting lifestyle now, like today, not tomorrow, not off in the future, but today. So how do we take that action? And a couple of these other questions we're going to go over, Tommy, are all about taking those different actions or insulating yourself from yourself, right? And how do I How do I take the action when I'm not motivated? How do I take the action when the scale's not rewarding me? How do I take the action when I've got stress and sleep and social pressures and all those different types of things?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, I like to make sure that when I'm doing the boring action, I'm also deliberately patting myself on the back or putting something that I am looking forward to after I do the mundane action. Because just because I've been doing it for 6 years now doesn't mean that the mundane is all of a sudden, woo, exciting.
Right. It gets more mundane, actually.
Yeah, right. For the 10,000th time I've done it, it's less exciting than the 1,000th time that I did it, even though it might have been exciting the 20th time that I did it, for example. But putting something that you enjoy, that you're going to get a dopamine hit afterwards, and it can be something small. It doesn't have to be something grandiose. It definitely doesn't have to be something in the kitchen. But I want to make sure that I have some opportunities for feeling like reward, feeling like I remembered that was the target I set for myself, and then I followed through on that. And that's why I still love setting a fasting timer 6 years in.
So simple.
Right. It's simple, but it's like a reminder. I drew that line in the sand, dang it. And then I hit it. So I'm getting multiple dopamine hits. Whereas if I just thought to myself, well, I know what time it is. I know what time I'm going to break that fast. I'm actually robbing myself of very, very low hanging dopamine fruit.
And that's why I love the temptation bundling that you alluded to earlier, is like because when you try to remove a habit from your life, especially food related habits, you create what's called a habit vacuum. So the cold turkey, abstain from every carbohydrate, never going to have another dinner roll or a tortilla chip when we go out to dinner. Right, that type of mentality sets you up for that resistance or that impatience, right?
Yeah.
So by taking these small actions like setting a fasting timer, putting to the question about a shorter fast recommended for chronic fatigue, putting your meal plan, like decide your meal ahead of time. My wife does this incredibly well. Like she plans her meals for the entire next day. So she doesn't have to think about it. She preps it. She goes. We're out the door. Clinic, sports, date nights, whatever it is that we've got going on right now in the busy sports season that we're in. She doesn't have to think about it because she's put those steps in place, those small actions. So
nice.
One of the things that we hear a lot, and this question came in from Jill, was around the conversation of weight. Since weight is likely to go up after a celebratory meal with sweets and alcohol, can you suggest a day after routine for those not so perfect days?
Absolutely.
What a great freaking question.
Right? I know the default, if I'm feeling like that, if I had a night like that or a day like that, the next day I will still have the temptation, that initial thought of like, man, just a burn day or two. Like if I set my timer for a 48-hour fast right now, that would basically like undo and help me to get back on track the quickest. But what we know is that that's not the highest likelihood of success.
Those fasts are harder mentally and physically.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's not that it can't be done. It's just that over the long term, if we want to be focused on high likelihood for success without feeling like, oh man, I'm just always trying to white knuckle it. I failed the last time I tried, but I'm going to just try again here. You don't want to string together multiple losses in a similar situation. You want to adjust that so you can raise your chance for success. So what I mean by that is after, like if it's a later night, or maybe you're eating or drinking in a way that you don't normally, or maybe it was just less sleep because you didn't protect sleep, or just the night went on later. What you want to do is make a proactive plan for the next day. I like to get in earlier nutrition. It's a little counterintuitive. So instead of just setting that longer fast, get
earlier
some
nutrition and earlier hydration. Even before you go to bed, hydrating with salt. We're going to answer a salt question next, so it's a perfect segue in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, Tommy, that's it right there. Is what's that proactive, what you're going to do the next day to make it easier.
I like a little proactive movement too, because when you wake up, so getting up at the same time where you normally do, or a bit earlier proactively than you would have normally in this situation. Like this situation lends itself to I'm gonna sleep in a little bit longer. But counterintuitively, if you stick with the same wake up routine as normal, or give yourself an extra 15 or 20 minutes, even better, because then you can start with a little bit of deliberate sunlight and movement early in the morning. It is going to get your body, your hunger hormones, and the rest of your physiology back on track. You're also going to have an earlier opportunity to burn through some of that extra blood sugar that likely hung around with you on the overnight cycle. And then what you are able to do is have a less likelihood for an insulin crash later in the morning. So get in some good lower carbohydrate nutrition too after that morning walk or exercise, whatever it is that you can do right there. And then you are well on your way to balancing out your physiology much, much faster than if you didn't proactively do those things. You could compress literally probably 6 to 8 hours worth of just kind of gliding through the day. You can get in front of it. And so that's where I start on a next day like that as far as a plan goes.
Two things I'm going to take some liberties here with, just kind of reading behind the lines, is celebratory meal, sweets, and alcohol.
Okay.
If those are downfalls for you, the sweets and alcohol, if those are areas that you have weakness around, or you want to improve on, or you want to cut down on, or you might have an air quotes sugar addiction, right? We've done a podcast episode on the research on what that truly is. And if you have that, if this is a once in a while thing versus hey, I'm saying yes too often. I'm saying my social calendar's packed. I'm saying yes too often. I really want you to sit with the am I saying yes too often possibility. Okay. Because that can kind of like lurk beneath the surface of our old behavior patterns, or I deserve this. Oh, it's a celebration. So I just want to put some soft kind of a little bit of thinking around that potential here. And I'm not saying this in the case of Jill. I don't know the specifics, but
sure.
I just feel like there might. What was that?
It can be the case.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's also part of our self-image too. So we don't really see it that way.
Yep, it's part of our life. It's part of our social calendar. It's part of our day-to-day. Exactly. So just a brief checkpoint there to kind of just assess the situation. But if it truly is a celebratory meal, all of the specifics we just talked through and the details Tommy just gave you, I want to just make a broad sweeping statement here is, why do you need a day after routine? Why not just stick to the plan? If you plan for the celebratory meal, then plan to just do what you planned the following day. That's turning the dull and mundane. That's turning the average into excellence. That's the consistent action, right? It's not like, oh, I did something bad. No, guilt, shame. It's like, no, like, again, I'm taking some liberties here, but just keep going with your life. There's nothing else that really needs to change. Like, yes, take some proactive steps to hydrate and give yourself a little more time and get more to make that next day easier. But what's your next day look like, right? Well, go do the day. Just take it on.
You're saying that this is likely, if it's not a yes problem, then there's a very good chance that this is just a blip on the radar.
Exactly.
And that
a paper cut in a house fire.
It doesn't need to be managed or micromanaged, or you don't necessarily need to change the plan because this happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And that's empowering, right? So I love that perspective. So great question. Hopefully you get some nuggets in there. We have two questions left. One's a quick one on hydration, and we just mentioned it with, hydrating properly. So personal story, we took our kids to the movies recently. The food I was going to get, they didn't have, so I ended up ordering a burger and some cheese curds, which is typically when we go to the movies, I typically don't eat at the movies because I don't like the way I feel after having movie theater popcorn. If we make popcorn at home, I'll indulge with the kids. Because again, if popcorn movie nights at home with the kids isn't part of the plan, then that's not the plan for me. But I ate, and then halfway through, I was like, "Oh man, I don't feel so great." Like I didn't feel sick. I just felt like sluggish already, and I was like, "Oh, I can feel my heart rate kind of increasing."
Oh yeah, yep.
So when we got home, I forced myself to go outside and play basketball with my son, and then we went for a walk around the loop, and I I had more hydration later in the day with some element and some salt than I typically would. Made sure that I went to bed on time, right? Because for me, meals like that will potentially disrupt my sleep or my behaviors at night.
Yeah.
So it was just those foundational things where it was like, hey, I want to regain control of this. So the salt for me and the hydration is a big one with Jill's kind of celebratory meal conversation. Candy asked the question, during the fasting window, I've been taking about 3 grams of salt, element or Redmond's throughout the day. Is that okay? Wondering if there's too much salt. I'm highly active. Also, can I take creatine during the fasting window? Absolutely. If you're new to hydration and not just drinking more water, we have a link for LMNT. They're these satchels, these packets that really make your fasting lifestyle and your longer fast in the days that you're doing either one meal a day or extended fasts. They really helps keeping your electrolyte balance, your true hydration in check, which makes your hunger better, your headaches better, your brain fog, your fatigue, your digestive changes, all of that. It just really helps your fasting lifestyle. So we were talking about that during the challenge. So the research is pretty clear, anywhere between 4 to 6 grams of salt. Now, we're not talking about table salt, like Morton's iodized salt. We're talking about mineral salts, Himalayan, Baja Gold, Celtic, Redmond's, real salt that has all of those trace minerals and electrolytes that allows your body to stay hydrated, not just drinking a bunch of water. So for me, I'm typically in about the 2 total grams a day of supplementation, where I feel my best, regardless if it's a meal day or a burn day. So is 3 on the higher end, Candy? Yes, it is. But if it's working for you and you feel good and your hunger's in check and you're able to hit the singles when it comes to your consistent fasting efforts, your 18-hour, 20-hour, 24-hour, and you're getting good quality nutrition in, I say don't change it if it's not broken.
Yeah. A lot of times when you find yourself doing a little bit more on the salt supplementation, you might be doing really well with your fasting times. Your fasting times might be on average a little bit longer. You might be getting into some good ketosis. Your blood sugar might be really like well managed. And the reason why you're needing a little bit more salt is because you're going longer periods between your meals with your salt. And then also you're finding your insulin levels low, which means that you're not just holding on to a whole bunch of salt and water. So you're excreting more of those electrolytes. So that may have been you finding kind of that natural sweet spot for yourself. Also, your salt needs, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, they might decrease over time. If you're on a fat loss phase, a fat loss journey, you might find yourself needing a little less salt over time as you drop some of that weight too, right?
Yep, and there's a great resource called The Salt Fix by Dr. James. Great book if you want to read more into it. If you're looking for Element, you haven't tried it, you've been thinking about trying it, we have a link. You can get a free sample pack that's in the show notes to see what your ideal flavor would be. But yeah, Tommy,
I like lemonade.
You like lemonade?
Yep.
Yeah, man. I'm a big grapefruit guy.
Grapefruit, right? Yeah.
Yep, grapefruit.
I like grapefruit too.
The thing with salt is when you go low carb or fasting, your kidneys excrete the excess water, to your point, Tommy, and then with that goes the electrolytes. So regaining those electrolytes, magnesium, potassium, calcium, and then all of the other ones, the other 74 to 94 trace minerals, depending on which salt you use, that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck and why we recommend it. So great question, Candy. Last question came in from James. He had a question. I had trouble making to beyond the 24-hour mark, making it past or beyond the 24-hour mark of fasting. It seems if I use intermittent fasting, mix 16-8, 18-6, 24, I can make the 80% success rate. So we talk about progress over perfection, right? So we don't need 100%. We need 80%. We need consistent efforts, right? Which we talked about earlier. Is that enough fasting to experience the benefits of fasting, or do I need to figure out how to be successful with the longer fast? What a great question, Jim.
So many good questions today. The short and long of it is that absolutely you can get a ton of benefits. You don't necessarily need to go beyond 20 hours to get a heck of a lot of benefits, and depending
to get the majority of the benefits of fasting,
right? And of course there are some things that happen that are different within the body, different physiology that kicks in after the 20-hour mark, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it. Now, at the same time, Jim, I don't know exactly how long you've been fasting for. So I will say that as you get more and more consistent with it, as you've been doing it longer and you get more metabolically flexible, you get a good handle on blood sugar, on your insulin, also on your food choices and food volume whenever you go to break your fast, it does typically get easier over time to get a little bit longer, to get into those longer ranges, right? So there's a natural progression there. So I'm going to say, even if it's felt like it's been tough lately, doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to feel like that. Okay. So whether or not you need it for your particular goals. And then I would also say that like going up to a 20-hour fast, that's a lot of burn time. So there's a high potential for fat loss during with that window, never going beyond that window. And a lot of folks are able to hit their long-term fat loss goals, never going beyond a 20-hour or fast or so. Now, at the same time, for me, I needed more than that. That wasn't enough to get at my levels of insulin resistance. I needed to keep insulin levels lower for longer to really move the needle. And so, and a lot of people find that to be the case too. So we do consider, beyond 20 hours, a set of important tools that we do like to develop, at least over time. So give yourself some room to continue developing those skills. And there are, some strategic things to do, obviously.
And ultimately, to your point, Tommy, it ultimately comes down to how much weight do you have to lose? Mm-hmm. What's your level of insulin resistance? What's your food relationship behavior? What's the stress level and quality, the busyness in your, there's so many different things that can be in the pro and con column of really pushing those longer fasts. Mm-hmm. I would love to see everyone be able to do a 48 to 72 hour fast periodically, right? Because you're going to get a little bit of additional physiological benefit. You're going to flex that fasting muscle. But for consistent weight loss, Jim, you're right in the sweet spot. Now, if it's not working, then we need to take into consideration some other things that we can do to help build that fasting muscle.
Yep.
So, Tommy, as we wrap up today, if you're looking for that type of guidance, we've got resources in the show notes on the website. We've got the Blueprint to Fasting for Fat Loss. It's a 20-page PDF. It gives you fasting schedules, how to ramp up, to Jim's question. If you're looking for a little bit more guidance or consistency, if you want to take the advanced accelerated version of that, then join the next challenge. We go through everything in detail, day after day, live training after live training, all the resources. And a lot of these questions that came out that we went over today came from the experience during the challenge. That's why we thought they'd be a big picture, kind of 30,000 foot view, and valuable to everybody listening in. So if you're looking for more guidance, you can head to the show notes, grab a resource. Tommy, one action step for the listeners today before we wrap up.
I think one action step would be just going back to the question that felt like it resonated the most for you. Maybe it was about consistency. Maybe it was a little bit more strategic on the timing or the salt or
the food relationships.
Relationships, right? And, just take one of those threads that really felt like it resonated with you, and maybe go back and just listen to it again, or maybe a couple of times, or put a note down. Just put yourself back in the last time that you kind of had that thought or had that frustration, or maybe you felt like, man, that's kind of been a struggle for me. And then just write down like one thing that you could do a little bit differently next time. And then one thing that you could take action on today that might be helpful. Maybe it's pulling up a YouTube video, checking out one of the books that you mentioned, like the Salt Fix, or like Salt, Sugar, Fat, as far as relationship with food. Something where you can just take a small action today, because action is going to lead to some feedback and a dopamine response because you took an action. And then you're more likely to take that next best action. So take some messy action today, and it will really reap some rewards for you.
All right. Love it. Another episode in the books. Thank you all for submitting the questions. Thanks for the 5-star shout outs and the reviews. We are on this journey with you. So Tommy, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for the conversation, and we will talk soon.
Thank you. Bye. So you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.